After 3 long years of scouring every nook and cranny of Lordran in anticipation of conquering a new crumbling, pestilent fantasy world, Dark Souls 2 has arrived, and we are prepared to die again and again. While this entry in the Souls franchise takes place in Drangleic instead of the familiar Lordran, there are certainly various connections between the two. Players will once again assume control of a chosen undead, and must rise up and light the bonfires to stave off another age of darkness. Standing between your humble avatar and the salvation of the damned landscape that surrounds you are numerous terrifying monstrosities and unnerving NPCs who may or may not be trustworthy.
Who are you? I, Gavlan. Gavlan will, Gavlan deal.
In foul and crumbling Drangleic, where Dark Souls 2 lays its scene, King Vendrick thrusts his kingdom into ruin after declaring war on the giants across the sea. Using their souls to construct his castle, Vendrick earned the ire of the giants and plunged his kingdom into chaos. The remnants have become undead and must fight to maintain their humanity lest they turn hollow. While the narrative still unfolds in the nuanced manner that characterized past Souls tales, players will notice Dark Souls 2 features a more refined story. There's still much to be left up to the player's interpretation, with many details to be found in item descriptions and conversations with the various denizens of Drangleic. Series veterans will find many allusions to the first Dark Souls with many subtle tie-ins. As is customary in the Souls series, cutscenes are limited, mainly used to introduce the lethal bosses that players will encounter, thereby never interrupting the pace and flow of the game. Dark Souls 2 attempts to make itself a bit more accessible by offering an early tutorial section that walks players through its combat and mechanics. While this easy tutorial feels out of place, it is wholly optional, allowing veterans to skip it. After a brief introduction, players are left to explore the world, where they will encounter an old woman who enables them to utilize an in-depth character creator to customize their avatar and select a class. Like Dark Souls, class determines the player's starting attributes, items, and spells, but has little influence in the long run, since the flexible leveling system allows players to specialize however they wish. While Dark Souls 2 does try to draw players in by being a bit more accessible, it would be foolish to think that the series has gone soft in an effort to sell more copies. Drangleic is quite a bit more difficult and unforgiving than Lordran or Boletaria from Demon Souls, and those looking for a challenge will be more than satisfied. As someone who has personally beaten both Dark Souls and Demon Souls numerous times, I'm not ashamed to say that I died on more than one occasion in Dark Souls 2. Deaths can feel a bit cheaper and sometimes unavoidable. The game manages to get away with it by offering an unmatched sense of reward, compelling players to continue even after the most egregious deaths occur. Veterans will also breathe a sigh of relief upon realizing that Dark Souls 2 has not been made more linear to increase its mass appeal. Upon reaching Majula, players are given minimal guidelines and are left to their own devices, being simply told to seek the king and gather 4 powerful souls. Similar to Demon Souls' Nexus, Majula serves as a hub between areas. The NPCs you encounter in your travels will congregate in Majula, offering goods and services for sale, as well as other means of upgrading your character. Certain actions can also result in slight upgrades to the town, which incentivizes return trips. These features add a sense of community to the otherwise dangerous and lonely world. You're also forced to level up in Majula, as the option to level at bonfires has been removed. On one hand, this might feel a bit tedious, as you're faced with an extra load screen every time you want to level. On the other hand, this makes the game feel more structured, and having a constant safe zone to visit allows for a much-needed reprieve from the harsh world. Once players decide to leave Majula, they can tackle the available areas in any order they wish, though clever design choices ensure that players are on the intended path without feeling as though they're sheep to be corralled by the game's level design. Unfortunately, while the world in Dark Souls 2 is larger than its predecessor, it suffers from a sprawling design that leaves it feeling less interconnected and forces players to be more reliant on the fast travel system. You won't find as many of the clever shortcuts as there were in Lordran, and as such, Dark Souls 2 provides players with the ability to fast travel from the onset. There are some positives that come from this design choice, however. The larger world makes exploration more exhilarating, and there is a much greater variety in the game's areas. The secret areas and items are more obscure than ever and require plenty of searching to find. Rather than simply having illusory walls that you have to strike to open, the inclusion of walls that need to be activated by enemy attacks or explosions make them all the more difficult to find. There is also a much greater emphasis on platforming, as there are plenty of hidden items and secrets waiting for brave players that are willing to take a leap of faith. Combat is fundamentally unchanged, but is far more refined. Changes to various weapons and equipment provide more viable playstyles than ever before. Shields are far less powerful than they were in previous games, making dodging and rolling more important, as well as making the temptation to dual-wield or two-handed weapon all the more appealing. These changes wouldn't mean much without a cast of dangerous and disgusting enemies to test your sword and board or casting skills against. Fighting even the lowliest enemy involves a bit of strategy and care, while groups of enemies provide the greatest challenge. Torches have also been added, which are held in your left hand in place of a shield. They can be lit by any bonfire, helping illuminate your way through dangerous areas. Lamps lit by your torch stay lit for the duration of the game, and certain enemies will react differently to light as well, such as a certain long-armed monster that will run and hide when approached with a torch, or act far more aggressive towards players without one. When an epic orchestral theme starts to play, in favor of the normal ambient noise, it's likely that you will find yourself standing toe-to-toe with one of Dark Souls' numerous and varied bosses. The boss fights are more intense than ever. A lot of the bosses felt similar in past games. Each of them feels unique and different from one another in this installment. From requiring lightning reflexes to killing enemies in a specific order, as well as positioning and memorizing attack patterns, there's no shortage of new and innovative challenges in Dark Souls 2. The optional bosses add another degree of difficulty, as they're quite a bit harder than the final boss of the game. The ESRB's teen rating is somewhat laughable, as the amount of blood, mature themes, and enemies alone should warrant an M rating akin to Demon Souls and Dark Souls. This isn't a problem, but I find it kind of funny and speculate that the game may have been too difficult for them to even play. The upgrade system has been simplified from the other Souls games. Equipment can be upgraded to a maximum of +5 or +10 from the very start. There's only one ember to be found, which allows for further modifications. This makes it much easier for newer players to figure out. However, finding the best weapons in the game still takes quite a bit of theory crafting, as you never know how good a weapon will be until you start to upgrade it. The same goes for stat scaling. Some items scale worse with modifications, while some of the weapons crafted from boss souls become significantly better. From Software has tweaked items a bit as well, as you begin the game with only one Estus flask, which can be upgraded as you progress throughout the game. That means that you'll primarily be relying on life gems, which are a consumable healing item designed to heal slowly over time, essentially combining elements of both Demon Souls and Dark Souls. Alternatively, whenever you die, a fraction of your overall health is removed, capping at 50% of your total health. Each death also causes your character to decay further, drastically changing your appearance. Human effigies can be used to restore your humanity as well as your health to the full amount. This adds an additional challenge to the game and penalty for dying. The fog walls from the other Souls games return as well and are just as mysterious as ever. You never know when an amazing item, deadly enemy, or bonfire could be hiding behind one, adding to the whole mystery and risk-reward aspect of the game. The bonfires have received a few changes from its predecessors. Bonfires still act as a point to restore magic charges and Estus flasks, but they also act to repair your equipment as well. Touching a bonfire will cause most of the enemies in a given region to respawn, aside from bosses and particularly powerful foes. A new mechanic has been added though. After you kill an enemy numerous times, it will stop respawning altogether. This helps when you're attempting to kill a powerful boss, only to run into the same monsters over and over again along the way. However, farming items in Souls is less viable. A new item called a bonfire aesthetic can be burned, which causes all the enemies in a given area to respawn, as well as the area boss, except they spawn at a higher difficulty. New Game Plus has been changed. Typically in the other Souls titles, once you complete the game, you're given the option to start all over, where all the enemies' health and damage have been adjusted to provide a greater challenge. New Game Plus in Dark Souls 2 has all this. It also includes new enemies that cannot even be seen on the first playthrough. The inclusion of additional items in Souls means that you'll be playing Dark Souls 2 for a very long time. That combined with the fact that the world and game in general is quite a bit longer than the first, makes this all the more welcomed. The The average playthrough will run you around 60 hours, without including PvP and leveling the various covenants. The innovative multiplayer makes a return as well. You can once again leave and read messages, allowing you to interact with other players. You're also able to summon players to aid you in difficult situations, as well as be invaded by enemy players. This is no longer limited to being a human, as you can be invaded by hostile players at any time, with the only safe spot being Majula. You do have to be in human form if you're looking to summon a friendly player though. This just adds to the overall challenge of Dark Souls 2, and makes it so that there's never a shortage of players to PvP with. Unfortunately, latency is still a bit of an issue in PvP, as laggy players are sometimes able to backstab you from a mile away. Luckily this isn't frequent and only happens maybe 1 in 10 fights. The Covenants are more defined in this version, each serving a unique purpose. From the Company of Champions, which disables multiplayer and makes all the enemies more difficult, to the Blue Sentinels, a Covenant designed purely to protect other players from hostile invasions. There's also the Brotherhood of Blood, a covenant dedicated to killing as many players as possible, as well as situational PvP covenants that are limited to certain areas, akin to the Forest of Dark Souls 1. One covenant will have you guarding a bell tower, while another will have you defending the domain of the Rat King.
The insolent fools line up to trample upon our burrows. My servant, dispatch these invaders, and thy reward will be handsome indeed. Rejoice, for the right to serve me is now thine. Do not disappoint me.
Where rats, zombies, and other creatures will help you repel invaders. You're even allowed to set up various traps, which poison or damage players' items. These are just some of the unique, fun, and welcome changes to the Covenant system. The art direction has been improved from the other Souls games, as the environments offer greater variety and feel more distinct from one another. Thankfully, this entry relies less on the gloomy interiors of previous titles, and features some brightly lit locales that maintain the atmosphere of loneliness and desperation that characterizes the series, but aren't as fatiguing to travel through. Games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill seem to have an influence on this installment as well, as visiting a village filled with crazed villagers and traveling through a foggy forest are quite memorable. Some areas are absolutely stunning, though the tech powering Dark Souls 2 is still rather disappointing. Textures can have horrendously low resolutions in some areas, and some really poor tiling is noticeable on certain structures. Occasionally, there are some dips in frame rate, though nothing game-breaking or annoying like the first game's Blight Town. In fact, every Souls game seems to require a Blight Town. The equivalent area in this installment runs smoothly. By improving on the near-flawless combat system, adding new playing styles, more variety, and tons of content, Dark Souls 2 manages to improve the legacy of its predecessors, despite its quirks. It manages to be even more difficult than its forebearers, and the changes to New Game Plus, as well as the Covenants, add more replayability than ever. Dark Souls 2 is the best game I've played in years, and one that I strongly recommend. If you've never experienced the frustration, wonder, and excitement of the Souls games, now is as good a time as any to start. Bertolt Brecht once said, "Do not fear death so much but rather the inadequate life." And we here at Analog Reviews say, an inadequate gamer is one who has not experienced Dark Souls. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe for more reviews, discussions, and top 10 lists. I'd also like to mention that we're doing a giveaway for the PC version of Dark Souls 2 on Steam. There are 3 ways to win. The first is by simply leaving a comment on the video. We'll pick one of you at random and give you the game through Steam on April 25th. We'll be giving away additional copies in our Steam group, as well as the website steamgifts.com. Details on how to enter those will be in the video description below, and if you missed this giveaway, we have plenty more planned for the future.